Hi, welcome to Tales from the Sky Lounge. It's a podcast about business, consulting, and venture investing. We get out there in the world and we talk to people who are making it happen and we get their stories. And if you could like and subscribe, producer James would be very happy about that. Today's guest in the Sky Lounge, Karen Rands. Hi, Karen.
Hello there, Todd. Happy to be here. Excited to be here today.
Yeah. Well, Karen, who are you and what are you working on?
So I am the leader of the compassionate capitalist movement, and that is on a mission. We are on a mission to shift the paradigm. I'm a disruptor, Todd. I am disrupting how people think about creating wealth. And that is by learning how to invest in entrepreneurs as an asset class, to invest with impact and purpose, and make a difference by funding innovations that you care about, the business down the street that you love and you want to see help them grow, and sharing in their success. And as we get into the show, we'll talk more and more about that. But I'm also serving as an entrepreneur in residence at an incubator down where I live outside of Atlanta, and it's an extension of what you know and I know is our ATDC up in Atlanta. It's Launch Fayette is their satellite campus, if you will, down here. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs about access to capital, because that's it's kind of both sides of the table is what I work on. It's really a lot of entrepreneurs, know they want to be an entrepreneur. They know they believe they want capital. Some of them may or may not be worthy of capital, but there's also a huge shortage of capital. There's just not enough investors for all the entrepreneurs that graduate out these programs. And that's the problem I'm solving and changing. And, there's many, many people, of all income levels are looking for alternatives to the high cost of getting involved in real estate, the the volatility of the stock market that seems to be outside of everybody's control these days, even the companies and their stock value. And what, a lot of people had the shininess of crypto has kind of gotten tarnished with some of the fraud and some of the grifts that are out there very publicly. So people are looking for an alternative, and they don't know. Most people don't even know they have the ability to invest in entrepreneurs. So I'm creating awareness, the tools, and the education to do that. And I'm fired up on that. I've been working on it for a
Yeah.
long time. But the good news, because I know you're
Yeah.
very much involved in a lot of this, AI is like the market is caught up to me.
Okay.
The people, the awareness, the demand, and the desire, they just don't know that it exists. They're looking for this secret key to prosperity, and I have the key, and I'm trying to provide the breadcrumbs for them to find the hidden location of that key, and so the people, it's just there, and the tools, because there's so much to get done, to build a digital platform, which I'm working on, so much to do it right. And now the powerful AI tools are really making me, I keep saying, if I could only bend time and make more of one of myself. And guess what? I'm really AI is helping me do that in a way that I really, literally 3 months ago, had no idea that I was going to be able to accomplish what I've been able to accomplish at the speed of AI these days.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm fired up and ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. This is awesome. So let's just kind of pick it up a couple of threads and just take them in order. So surely your whole life, you weren't an angel investor or a compassionate capitalist. I think let's pick up your career somewhere around IBM. So you were an IBMer, which is a very prestigious gig. Big blue, any suit as long as it's gray or black, right? And then,
So true.
so how do you,
I was there during those days.
and then what were you doing? Talk to us about IBM, and then kind of, I think you did intrapreneurship, which I think is fascinating. What was that like? And then, what does an intrapreneur, do at a big company like that?
Okay, yes. IBM had not, when I joined IBM, just so everybody really gets to appreciate how good my skincare is. I joined IBM back in in 1987.
Okay. Yeah.
Time warp. IBM was just coming out with the PS2 and OS2 at the time. Okay, so that was their revolution into the multi-processing systems, a multi-processing operating system, and they needed to hire people. They needed to hire people to really push this in the dealer channels, and really, and it was the first time they had done new hires in a very long time in the division that handled distribution of computers. And so I was a rebel, if you can imagine that, even back in those days. When that Because I left IBM. IBM had been a case study at my MBA program at University of Florida of
Oh, okay.
how to do things, where there was like the adage that if you would not get fired if you bought IBM back then. Okay, that was like the thing. IBM was a thing. You could never go wrong if your company decided to do that. But I came in when IBM was getting nipped at the heels by all these different new companies, these new innovative companies, Dell, Compaq, right? All these things, Apple, of course, Microsoft's alliance with IBM shifted, right? And so there was that relationship was breaking apart. There was a book called the Unmaking of Baby Blue, and it was about this division between IBM and how it was really hampering IBM, because IBM was struggling to move from a mainframe world to this world of distributed computing and PCs and stuff like that. So, um, I remember when IBM came out. So here's where I was with the 9X Business Center channel. Okay. So that was IBM had sold their product stores. IBM product stores were getting out of retail, and they'd sold it to 9X Business Centers. And we were coming out with desktop publishing. Does even anybody do desktop? Do you even know what that is anymore? Desktop publishing. And we had come out with this printer, and then within like a year, because we were trying to compete with Apple, and I was having to negotiate with 9X about carrying more IBM products versus Apple products. And desktop publishing ended up being one of those things. And IBM had come out with, and I remember arguing so much. Here's a newbie that didn't know better, but I was like, that they couldn't, came out with a brand new desktop publishing printer with no upgrade path, and people that had bought it or no credit towards buying the new one. And it solved all the problems that everybody had been complaining about. So for the technology listeners out there, this is one of your challenges, right? And IBM, because they were IBM, was like, that they did not, which ended up biting them later on in their customer service, right? They took for granted that, customers would always be with IBM. And so fast forward as we went through, and this was like a wake up call to me on corporate America versus these young, innovative companies that are all about, product market fit, customer iteration, all that kind of stuff, right? So a lot of what I frame myself today, what I've learned in advising entrepreneurs, is in the roots of IBM, and that evolution of big companies getting stagnant and what happens to them, and the fight that innovation, and how innovative companies can wedge themselves in to take market share from a big dominant player. I saw that, I lived through that. And then, but then how a company can eventually pivot and become a much more innovative, even a big stodgy company can become very innovative, was part of my journey there. But and how, all of that. And then as we get to talking about when I started to run the angel investor group, understanding the whole relationship of capital and the ability to innovate and things like that. So
Hmm.
fast forward, when IBM, when Computerland bought the 9X Business Center, I realized the writing on the wall was there was no reason. They were on the West Coast, no reason to have a team in Atlanta. I needed to go find a new job, even though the the boss of all of us believed that they could create an East Coast team and a West Coast team, and that didn't happen. But I started looking around because IBM had this great internal job posting thing to be able to go to different divisions and stuff like that. And I looked around, and there was a lot of infighting in divisions in IBM, but I found a job that they were going to they were creating this PC fighter pilot program.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
For in IBM had this division M&S, which was the mainframes, and then NDD was the division that handled all the PCs. The NDD was becoming the PC company, but at the time it was called internally it was all the nickel and dime division was how the mainframe.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was moving over to the M&S organization and to be on area staff. So within a hierarchy of an organization, you have marketing units, blah, 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 goes up to an area staff and then divisions and things like that. And so I was on the area staff, which would be a leap for me, a big leap, but I was qualified to jump into that level of a job because my peer group was doing it within within NDD division. And management sat on they wanted me, they wanted to hire me, they were willing to bring me over, and they sat on it for like 5 months before they would release me to go to this new division, this other job, right? It was really a frustrating time for me, but it taught me a big part of being in charge of your career. And so this was where sort of part of the entrepreneur part came in because I, making that leap, then over in that particular company, I was working in there. They had IBM was going through massive layoffs. This is like leading into the early 90s. Okay. They were massive layoffs because they were this reorganization, all these competitors nipping at the heels. If you recall back at that point in time in IBM's history, our property was worth more than our shares, right? Our market value. We were in a tough stitch and they had laid off a lot of people. Turned out they had laid off a lot of people that had a lot of experience of figuring things out. And so, and how to work within the system. And I wasn't eligible for any of the programs at the time. And so, but I got into this job. And part of what they were doing in there was they were bringing on these specialty reps to be to teach the M&S reps or the people that were still calling on big companies to about the PCs. Didn't want to have them learn PCs and stuff like that. So they had fighter pilots that would come in, and I got a bird's eye seat at innovation and how IBM was coming out with new products, trying to be relevant. So they were innovating on wireless LANs, okay, handheld computers that you could write on. Okay, very ahead of its time at the time. It was called the ThinkPad, and
Yeah.
uh, it was because it was like a pad, right? The ThinkPad, no, it was like anyway, and they had wireless stuff, and it was really, really innovative. And they were coming out with these things called these professional careers. One of them was segment manager. And I had moved over, I was on area staff. I had done a gig where I had signed up for this and I'd gone down to Boca Raton, which is where a lot of the PC and innovation stuff was invented in IBM's world. And I went down there on a special assignment to see if it was worth IBM coming out with DOS 7, a new DOS. Think about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Disk operating system. So Microsoft had MS-DOS and we had PC-DOS, and they had a GUI interface. We did really not have a GUI interface on our DOS at the time, and I had so this was I had been on. This was after the Olympics, and so this is like in I guess 97 after the Olympics. I was and I had met these people that were friends of my husband's that worked for this company Synergistic, that everybody would know them. They're the ones that when you go through, if you have a tag still on your they were sponsors of the Olympics, and they tags when you go through a security thing, dings or your badges. This was all their system, and one of them was a lead programmer, team, and she said the one thing DOS needs is we want PC DOS. It's thin. We don't want MS DOS because MS DOS has all that gooey stuff. It is thin, and we use it inside of our chips and our RFID tags, and we need it to be TCP/IP enabled.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
right? So I did like real like just use my connections, pulled all this data, created this presentation, and sure enough, they came out with a DOS 7 that had TCP/IP. Now I don't get any credit for that other than being able to tell the story, but it was interesting to me in the learning curve of because they had all these you know how when you fill out those now you know how when you fill out those things where these like you're signing up for your warranty and you like your feedback. Well, the temporary office they gave me had boxes of those that people had filled out that had nothing had ever been done with them. So I
Oh
just
wow.
started calling people, customer
Okay.
discovery. What are you using DOS for? Right? And so all of that was like, it said, oh, okay. And that led to my being able, because the team I was on was this OS2, PS2 team. IBM bought Lotus. That team became the Lotus team. There is no pin, and I had created it when I was doing this pin segment stuff. I had recruited a developer to create a GUI interface for a programming tool to use for pin for creating apps. You got to be able to create an app for a hardware product, or else nobody wants to buy the hardware product just to draw on. What are you going to do? Write on in a meeting? Had to have productivity. So with that tool, I was able to get development for in the Olympics to score the stats for basketball,
Oh,
right? Because
yeah.
there's a court and volleyball, circle square, meant that they scored that from that spot where they shot it. For Terminex to be able to use it when they walk around and they want to actually create a proposal for being able to, what's the cost of getting termite service at your house? Right, for the orthopedic, I forget the name of the company, but it was in Atlanta that does all the recovery for orthopedic surgery and stuff like that, to be able to circle the body and do the exercises. Oh, you got a knee surgery, and this is what you're gonna do on a bot. You know what I mean? All of that stuff came out of that initiative. And because of that, I had been working with the wireless people because it was PIN, right? And IBM was creating a new business that was for PIN wireless business as a services organization. So I went in there to negotiate the contracts for IBM because IBM was getting out of the mobile and wireless business. Now we were going to, because it was, big companies, they could be doing, I learned this, they could be doing a lot of money, but it's a rounding error and, internal, they'll change. And so I went over there to be able to negotiate all the contracts for IBM to resell symbols, handhelds, hardened systems, all the different Wi-Fi, wide area microwave systems. I negotiated all those contracts to be able for IBM to be able to resell those and build this business. And along the way, lots of great innovation coming out of that Chicago Board of Trade. Back then, they were still using paper to run an order up to the top of the thing and put the order in. They wanted to be able to do Wi-Fi in there, but it's metal. It was on metal because it's secure. So it was
Right.
metal stands, metal tier, everything was metal in there. And you can imagine Wi-Fi bouncing off the thing. So programming it so it would be able to send and receive from these handheld devices and not ricochet was, a big thing. Healthcare, wireless, working on all that kind of stuff. When my boss came to me and said, we need to start doing white papers and so that we can justify our existence, I was like,
Okay.
revenue? We did $35 million our first year of operation, which was a rounding error for IBM. But if it had been a startup, it would have been, woo, wow, what a great startup, right? They were starting a new organization called Complex Opportunity Business Managers. And that was because we were in the call centers and we had all these people, these young reps in these call centers that were handling the business of anybody that didn't have a mainframe, still in the mainframe days. And they were getting their lunch eaten by Compaq and all these other guys because eBay and Amazon and all these people were starting at the ground level with these companies and then not switching off to go to somebody like IBM because they were already standardized on something. And those guys had, big iron as well. And so they wanted to figure out. So my job was working with these .com type reps inside of IBM that knew nothing about anything, but I was validating businesses and their business model, their technology model, getting resources from IBM so they could go out and get venture capital and then come back and spend it with IBM.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Okay. So that was the thing. We were trying to help them be qualified for venture capital so they would get it, love us. We would give them some equipment, come back and spend it with IBM. I
Is
had
that like a spin out, or where did the ideas come from? Or did they come to
these
you and that
were
was a program?
all so I had regular entrepreneurs that were trying to do business. Like again, still IBM had a cachet to it. And we would be like, oh, a click and mortar wanting to go online. I had a client there that was trying to do, the photo booths, wanted to be able to wire up a photo booth without running cables all through a mall to be able to update and put seasonal pictures in there, stuff like that. So when people go in and do a screenshot and have a frame around them, they can pick and, all that kind of stuff. All these different types of solutions. Hotels that wanted to be able to program their TVs to be able to get to the internet and connect up with that, or have these terminals in the rooms. I mean, lots of working with Marriott on this stuff. So lots of different solutions. And I had this one company that I had been working with in all my different jobs that was doing this exciting uh, a software solution that IBM had given a lot of technology to and had provided equipment to, and they had invented this software that would get you to not ever it was a healthcare solution that would, based on the density of matter, would match up all your digital images, x-rays, MRIs, whatever, CAT scans, whatever it was, and then be able to isolate. So if somebody was having a stroke, within a very short period of time, the technician would be able to see, the radiologist, oh, it's a hemorrhage or it's a blockage, because they could administer TPA, whatever the drug was at the time, to be able to, if they administered it and it was a blockage, it would basically erase all the effects of the stroke. If it was a hemorrhage, it would kill them instantly. And so they were rarely using this drug because it would take sometimes an hour or so to be able to figure out. So because the reason why we're all one entity is that everything in our body has a different density. Our blood is different density than our blood vessels, right? And so it would isolate that so you could see it. Where was an actual kidney stone? All of that stuff, right? And so I, in my naivete, seeing all this exciting .com stuff happening, said, I want to be in this parade, not watch this.
I want to play that game.
Yeah, I want to get
Yeah.
in this .com. I'm going to go work for this company and I'm going
Okay.
to go raise them capital. I'm going to do their go to market. I know how to get this thing go to market. I know all this stuff. I'm going to be part of that. And this is going to be this is my big payday. I'm going to be one of those people. And so I learned three things that came out of that. The first one defined, first one, you hear the type A team. So a B product with an A team will get funding faster than a team with a, a I'm sorry, a B team with an A product. Okay.
Team is more important than
Team is
product.
more important because they know how
Okay.
to navigate it when there's issues, and there will always be issues and bumps in the road. They have experience with that. They have industry insights, whatever. In this particular
Do you
case,
feel like
I did not.
that's true still today? I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's
This
even
guy
more of a
is
premium.
this is appropriate for you guys over at Tech CXO, is that they have he had his CFO was not a real CFO. It was an accountant buddy of his from college, right? And so they were going to give him millions of dollars. They wanted to have a CFO in place. Okay. And so, that was number one. And the second piece was he had an attitude problem. Got to be
Oh no.
coachable. You got to
Okay.
be able, the people with the money, The man with the check wins. Like, it's like the people with the money, they get to make the rules a lot of times.
He who he who has the gold makes the rules.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And I knew he was a tough cookie because he'd been my customer, but I could talk tough to him. I could be like, now don't do that. This is like, stop that, whatever. I could talk tough to him. Right? Because I guess I kind of had some kind of a leverage, right? And so, but if they sense that, like, my way or the highway kind of an attitude of a CFO or CEO, then they're like, or a founder, they're like, next. They don't even bother having the second conversation with you, right? And so, it was tough. And then we had the timing of this was January of 2000.
Oh, yeah.
So that
Yeah,
so
weird
that
year, right?
that was not the beginning, like, the writing was on the wall that we were in a tech bubble that was about to collapse. But because I was in my own IBM bubble, I had no idea that that was happening. And I chose to leave to go do this at the time when it was about to be there was still some capital out there, and we were going after capital. We were getting meetings. I knew nothing about getting meetings, but I was getting meetings, right? And because this was compelling software. But it was really fast that if you got, VCs that had this bit of money, they're going to be like, okay, I don't have wipeout, or I don't have extra money to help navigate or cycles with this stuff. We're entering this precarious space. I want somebody that knows how to manage to this and get a product to market, right? No, 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 no is what we got. But along the way, I discovered angel investing.
Oh, okay.
And that became the pivot for me, because I went to check out this angel group that I was going to see about him pitching at. And I was also kind of bird dogging, looking for bigger deals for my cousin, who I thought was part of a VC company. That was another lesson, but we don't have to get into that right now. And so but the point is that I got invited to this angel group. I walked in there, and it was like, oh my God, look at this. This is a group that they really are the ones that get to decide what innovation gets to market. What innovation do we have to solve the problems of our world, or the problems we care about? Because without capital, that solution, that solution is still out there. If somebody wants to pick that software up and run with it, he would probably sell it for really cheap, because he never got that company built, because he couldn't get funding because of those things that I just talked about, right? And so he and so the and so but the point was that I figured out that this was where the decisions are made with these people on what innovation, what happens. And then it formed a lot. Like, when I still remember to this day the feeling I had walking back into the parking deck from that meeting, of like goose pimples. Like, I had found my space. I had found this was what that journey all the way through IBM, all of my own attempts to start a business, whatever, along the way, all the things that, like, I had been getting prepared for this, other than the fact that I realized that I didn't know this, what I'm about to drop right now. I didn't know this golden nugget or this revelation until just really a few years ago, because I just sort of I just dove right in. Like, it was still part of the venture capital, but smaller in the thing. It was the money that an entrepreneur or founder needs before they're venture capital ready, even before they're bankable. I only knew about banks and VCs when I was with IBM. And that was my aha moment, when I came out with my first book, trying to figure out, why is it that so few people that have the money to be angel investors know about angel investing? And then I
Mhm.
realized my own role as a mid-tier, manager in IBM, had never heard the words angel investor until I got invited to that meeting and walked in
And
there. Right?
and then tell us about that group. So, where was that? And then did you have like a little nest egg,
No,
401k
so
or
again, I was there, just there to check it out, but that's where the real door opening of the door. Cause so, like, I realized that I was working with this guy and not getting paid. right? And so if I'm not going to get paid, I might as well do something that, whatever. I had put together a giant RFP for wireless all over the state, lots of different things that I was spinning plates with, right? And then when I walked in here, I was like, "Oh, this is what I'm meant to do." And the founder of that group, the group was here in Atlanta, Network of Business Angels and Investors, NBA and I. The founder of that group, Jerry Martin, he had been doing it for over a decade. He was, and like a lot for a while. And it started with 5 guys around a table at a Denny's and grew into being this, really the only other real angel group besides Atlanta Technology Angels in Atlanta at the time. And he wanted to retire. He wanted to get out of the game and he wanted
Where?
to mentor
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
He wanted to mentor.
Where?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have so many questions. So, we talk about like the MSA mafia is legendary. Was that part of that DNA, or where did these people come from, or were they plowing money back in from some other really cool venture? We all hear about the class of 74, 75 from Georgia Tech, being legendary. Where was it? Was there like a little swath of folks that, or just
No,
random? Okay.
it led me to learn, you sometimes the the path for learning is littered with rocks that you fall over and fall on your face and you pick yourself back up and you dust yourself off, turn yourself around and continue on down the road and hopefully learn your lesson or figure out why you weren't paying attention to that rock or whatever, right? And so um that particular group was primarily accredited investors based off of their jobs,
Okay.
their earned
So
income, not
high
independently
earner.
wealthy from an exit, right?
Okay.
There was very few in the group that were independently wealthy from their exit, right? Which was really, I didn't really truly understand that at the time. So they were partners of law firms, they were presidents of their own companies, they were, high net worth, doctors, different, folks that were there, but not really no, I think most of those people were at Atlanta Technology Angels or were forming their own sort of peer group informally looking at these kind of things, right? And looking at deals that they brought each other kind of deals, right? I think that was more of what the landscape was at the time. But again, I was really like, keep in mind, I wasn't part of the angel community, had not even heard of angel investing until I came in. So my learning curve was really big, on this and even the landscape of Atlanta, right? And who was who. And we joke, okay, so I'll tell a little story here. Sig Mosley, for those people in Atlanta, everybody around Atlanta and Southeast, most people know Sig Mosley. He was, and he's legendary as the godfather of angel investing in Atlanta. He was the guy that really kind of put ourselves on the map. Um, and I got a chance to sit down with him shortly after I took over this group, right? And shortly after I became the person running it, right? And trying to like figure out how to actually build it up and, get other types of investors in there. And come to find out a lot of the people that I thought were members really weren't members. And so there was really no revenue model in it.
Oh.
And
Uh-oh.
so, having to rebuild it, I did rebuild it to be one of the most active in the Southeast and the top 50 in the US at the time. Took several years to do that, but I was able to do that. But I remember sitting down with him and not really realizing that the big exit that like put him on the mark to be the guy that could invest in 100 companies over the last 10, 15, 20 years, whatever that time frame is, 20 years. I sat down with him and so I did not come into it like going, oh my God, he is the godfather of angel investing. He was just the guy that people said, oh, you should go sit down with him. So I was asking about the climate of Atlanta and angels and why aren't there more angels, that kind of a thing. And at the time he said, oh, it's because real estate's so cheap here.
Okay. Yeah. And I
Right?
imagine Sig's had that conversation with a lot of people over the
Yeah.
years.
And it was
So,
very true back then. He and I
Okay.
have a different conversation now, but back
Okay.
then it was very, very, very true, right? Because I would stop waving my credit card at you. So it was very, very true at the time, because that was the nature of real estate everywhere, which is formed. We'll get into that later, which is formed sort of, the target market now. But and I guess I talked about it at the beginning, right? The and so and it's legendary of a guy that had a big exit. We don't like to say his name out loud in a lot of our circles. I think you probably know who he is. That went up to the lake, and after he got his big exit, and he went up to the lake and never came back and made any more angel investing, and learned how to play, grew a beer and learned how to play guitar. Kind of, I think you know that folklore. And that was one of those that we had a real tough time in Atlanta, creating this multi-generational of build a company, become an investor, build a company, until like really David Cummings came along, right? He was, John Imlay was, the guy, right? There wasn't a lot of other ones of those, at the time, that were committed to building our ecosystem in Atlanta the way Sig was, and then a little bit later on, David Cummings was. And so it was really interesting, and I was, like, really frustrated with that answer, but it was true. I kept hitting that wall for a very, very long period of time, and I only in the last 5 years have I been able to unpack that. When I wrote the first book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, a lot of what I teach in that book was trying to apply what people that have become successful real estate investors could apply, what they knew about that, and then and learn how to invest in entrepreneurs as an asset class, and take that skill set and apply it over here. It's kind of weaving in subliminally into that book, but yeah, that was a big part of it.
So I took a little detour into real estate investing for, I don't know, a couple decades. So, one of the things I think, the mentality, real estate's safe, and there's a lot of safe single digit millionaires in the world that have made it over decades with a couple chunks of real estate. It's, dirt don't hurt. Um, so, but the expectation is you put money in like a REIT, right? So you look at what a REIT looks like. You put money in, that's a fund, basically. They go buy some dirt or some, real estate building or something. And then there's an expectation that there's a coupon that gets thrown off, right? Revenue, monthly revenue, that comes in. Yeah, you own it. Yeah, the building's probably going to go up a little bit. And yeah, you're going to pay down your mortgage or whatever, or the financing, or maybe not. You just kind of keep rolling it, in a commercial world. Um, how do you how do you take that mentality of people that have that mailbox money, however small it is, and then convince them that, hey, take your money, that same money, or at least some of it, plow it in a business that's like super iffy. 1 in 10, it's actually going to return money to you, or maybe 3 in 10. And then, by the way, you're not going to get any money back along the way ever. It's just a different mindset, and then kind of that's that conversation you have to have, right? And then, if we had a way to invest, part B, if we had a way to invest in startups where we could get a little money back along the way, do you think that would change some of these dynamics, or a willingness to go into the angel asset class, high tech, high alpha, type of asset? Okay. Is this in your strike zone, or have you had these conversations with people?
Thank you
Yeah.
for that question, Todd.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll
Yeah,
shut up and let you,
yeah, we didn't even plan ahead on that one.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, where is there room for that? Or does that exist?
Yeah,
And
so
then what's angel investing look like now, and then what should it look like, or how can we help the situation?
okay, so here's the thing, and this is where the dynamics of crowdfunding really changed the game. Okay, equity crowdfunding. Okay. So, and it also, I haven't yet, I'm still tackling this one problem of awareness. So I haven't yet tackled the problem of changing the paradigm of how angel investors think. Okay. Because they are the model that evolved in the 80s, Silicon Valley, slowly go across the nation. You're, building, putting in early stage startup, seed stage, pre-seed stage, right?
Whatever it is today, right?
All that
Yeah.
stuff, and then it's going to build this unicorn value and then exit out kind of a thing. That model is, that one model, and it's never been innovated.
Okay. Okay.
Never been innovated. It is the way people have always done it, even though they complain about the fact that they, oh, only three this. And I would teach people, one of the things I teach people, I say, look, VCs have all the money in the world and the resources to be able to get it right. And they can't even get it right because they're the ones that create the model or the paradigm that it's out of 10 investments, you're going to have one that hits 10x. This is what I use in my new book. One that takes 10x, actually all of them, but two 5x. Like make my numbers right here. Two 5x, two 2x, three two break even, and three go out of business. Okay.
And that would be actually a pretty good portfolio for a lot of people in this day
Well,
and age.
that, and yeah, it's and I'll probably have to redo my math on that for people that because they kind of give me some pushback on it, but I think it's a realistic thing. I increase my intention is to decrease the odds with what I call the blueprint for angel investing or angel profitability blueprint is what it's actually called. Okay, that I go into detail in my Compassionalist Academy and in my new book, right? But there's and so the idea is, and where we got into this was revenue producing or shared income. So, and in fact, first off, angel investors, people that are serious, I call them business angels in the business of investing. They're planning on investing some amount of money every year and building a portfolio over time. That's the first lesson, mental thing that anybody starting to invest outside of stocks and real estate need to adopt, the alternative investing. So to me, angel investing falls into the alternative investing category. Okay. And so, uh, I learned this like the guy's name is escaping me right now, but they sometimes they're carving out 25% of their portfolio or their planned investments to do this kind of alternative investing. Okay. So it's never, everything. So that's first thing. So you don't put everything at risk when you do that. And it always has to be money that if you lose it, it's not going to kill you. Okay. Because you can't predict, some things there's some things that you can predict. And now with AI, there's various models of things that people have been doing. I have a podcast coming out myself that's talking about the, language patterns of founders and their ability to lead teams and
And no kidding.
being coachable and just like you can run their things through like the language patterns that are associated with their personality type and they can be the characteristics of a startup that maverick that does everything to get there is different than the characteristics of think of Steve Jobs versus John Scully that runs a stereo
Yeah.
company, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, right.
You
Okay.
know? And so that is, but no anticipating that as an investor or a venture capitalist to, when you're making these investments, right? And so it's so there's better tools about that, but there's always the black swan like a COVID that you just can't predict that can do or a great recession. And what we learned about real estate, because that's where we came into this, no asset is immune to risk and volatility. We went into the Great Recession because of the collapse of the real estate market. There's a lot of, and I talk about it in my first book that triggered that, right? That is that like you got to watch what Washington does because they can make decisions that can derail you if you don't anticipate, you don't like look ahead at what the implications of that could be. And it was the great modernization of the Securities Act that set the stage for what led to the collapse of the real estate market. And
And we're
so,
talking 2008 Great Recession, long-term
right,
capital.
right.
Okay. Yeah.
And so and then which is different than what we have now, where it's an inflated value. the Tax Act of 2017 and opportunity zones and the elimination of capital gains for investing in real estate triggered the inflation that we have, the inflated value of real estate we have right now.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So, which I predicted back then. Man, I should if I could do a podcast on predictions of government actions and what the effect will be down the stream, that would be. But whatever. You have to wait 10 years later so you can say, see, I was right. But that's so
So angel investing. Okay. So how do
so
we,
so
yeah,
that so how you do that is there's and what I teach for like in the angel profitability blueprint, the first thing they do is look for 3 deals, 3 opportunities to invest that's going to give them revenue, either in a throw out of a dividend kind of a thing like you're talking about in the REITs, or it's going to be a revenue share that pays them. And I first learned about revenue share in my angel investor group, where a company they were seeking angel investor capital, and they were going to pay out a percentage of revenue until 3 times their money had been paid. So it was anchored in the equity, but it was going to be paid off. And once they were paid off, they were exiting out of the equity of the company.
so
So it
this is
was
the Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, you'll pay me a royalty on everything until I get my money back, and then we'll split it in some other interesting way, right?
exactly.
Okay.
They did. And it was actually the company was a mobile infrared scanner of soybeans to detect disease in them before it appeared on the leaves or the beans, because Georgia has a huge soybean crop industry and it was decimated by however many millions
Bug
and
or something.
millions of dollars. This was this thing. And, he had all these customers that wanted it. If he could get past this validation thing, blah, 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 blah. And right. And so but it was foreign to the angel investors. So they didn't understand how you would do a revenue share. And so, kind of a deal. It was just one of those things. So now, people want something like that. A guy was doing something where it was speculative in a way, but it was for digging a new technology to dig deeper and different into the shoals of oil and extract oil out, and you would get a revenue share of the oil produced in that mine. And he did an
Okay.
LLC for each one of them, right? And so
Cool.
that was for accredited investors. All of those were for accredited investors. And then but in the crowdfunding space, accredited and unaccredited can participate in there's a company that I work with, Worthy Bonds, that they call it bonds, right? It's not really, but it's really a Reg CF platform, Reg A plus platform in a way that will they own, your name goes on the deed, and they buy these assisted living facilities that are underperforming, rehab them, get them up to being very profitable, and sell. And
Cool.
along the way, you share in the revenue of that facility as it's, ramping up, and then and they guarantee a 12%.
And you do that on a crowdfunding platform, and then everybody can put in $500 or $1,000, and then you get like a little coupon
Yep.
monthly or quarterly, or how does
Yeah.
it come out?
Well, they let you accumulate it if you want, similar to a convertible kind of a
Okay.
thing, or you can get
Okay.
paid out. If you accumulate it, they give you more money when it gets
Okay.
ready to go to
Get a
that
little
next thing.
interest
Yep.
or
So
discount if you take it out. Okay.
yeah, so it's and so there's so many different models that way. So part of it is learning. And one of the things I teach, like in Georgia, we have this thing called Invest Georgia exemption, which is accredited and unaccredited. It operates, it was put in place actually prior to the Jobs Act of 2012. It's just not well known. And companies can raise up to $5 million through interstate exemption from investors if they're in the state, from investors in the state. And I love to use it as a model that a regular Main Street business that maybe wants to become a franchise, right?
Okay.
They want to do that. Let's and they particularly if they're restaurants are notorious for struggling to raise capital and even getting bank loans, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they want to open up a second location. It's where customers become investors, and you could do and a lot of businesses royalty financing, revenue share financing works really well for businesses that don't have a desire to exit in 5 years. They're not trying to get to be $100 million company that can exit. They might be a Main Street type of business, but they can raise capital through a revenue share model by getting that to do the next thing they want to do, right? That is directly tied to revenue. Then, through this model of getting their customers to be their investors and look on that through various different crowdfunding platforms.
So let me kind of throw a curveball at you, but this is something I've been thinking about, and I think it aligns very well with the way you're thinking. Is the something I've been thinking about recently is with the new AI tools, everything's getting cheaper and easier, and getting into the market is gotten so much easier. So if if we could get companies launched out in the market, and then get these revenue split deals, um, I think there's a lot of problems that we could attack that used to be below the investable margin. So if you're not going to get to $1 million run rate, or if you're never going to get to that $1 billion valuation, VCs would never touch you. Therefore, the seed investors would never touch you. Now, I think there's a whole class of what we used to call lifestyle businesses, which is a horrible word, but I think it's a valid business model. There's a lot of $1 to $5 million businesses, to be spun up that could be done, run by one, two, three, four, five people. That's a really great little lifestyle. And then these types of investment models where you throw in a little bit of cash to get them going, not much, and then do a rev split, as you go, um, suddenly make a huge amount of sense. And there's way more of those kind of companies that people could start, and address and change their lifestyle drastically and become the next, plow it back in. And then, we got a lot more economic activity in the community. Where's that deal pile or where should it be? Or how do we connect? How do we connect all these people? Or where is there like a website you go to, www.revenueinvestor.com or something? Where do these people live? How do we get these entrepreneurs together with the folks? How do we raise the awareness of these types of deals? Because it seems like nobody I know is doing those kind of deals. But I think, when you say it out loud, everybody's like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. Like that would be a lot more comfortable in a lot of interesting ways.
Well,
Um,
okay, so I think that where revenue share does not work is when it's a pure concept startup with not really sure that there's a market, right?
yeah, but like, why are we starting those kind of companies in this day and age when there's so many great problems that you can get out there in the market and immediately, like in a month or two or a quarter, no more than one quarter, start turning in the revenue. And then it's so easy to start companies. It's hard to keep them going. It's hard to sell, but you know, keep iterating and then get in light and then pull the trigger a couple different
Yeah.
times.
I mean,
Don't go 3 years and not sell anything. That's
I
unforgivable right now, right?
Yeah, and I could see where an organization like what you're a part of, because you've got the deep experience of people that know how to navigate to get to customers, to iterate, to do that kind of stuff where, the entrepreneur that is, tinkering with AI, thinking about coming up with some kind of a model. There's lots of like, I was at a meeting this morning. 1 million cups is a Kaufman
Oh yeah,
initiative, right? They have one
yeah, yeah.
down here, right? Um, and so it was the guy that kind of runs it was talking about his excitement and really saying, "Hey, try this app out." And he had just created an app in AI, right? And it was basically he said, "Yeah, it took me like a weekend to do it, and it's really cool." And the idea is if you remember, well, you may not remember this app. It was back in the day when like people and mobile phones and being out the same thing was real. And you wanted to know who else of your friends were here. I think it was called
Yeah.
Bumblebee or something like that, right? And
Or
it got,
like the check-in apps, so like Foursquare or stuff like that,
yeah,
where
then
you
it got
yeah.
and then you would be able to connect up. So his idea is that like in different communities, you would just know within that community who was around you because geocaching works all the time now, right? You don't have to
Okay.
check in.
Okay.
So and this lady in the thing says, "Oh yeah, I go to all these trade shows, and the problem with trade shows is that I meet all these people, but I don't know who was at this trade show, this next trade show. I knew that I would be able to connect up with them and do all this kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, yeah, there's people working on that, right? There's one within our Thai community that's doing something similar, although it's driven by the company capturing the leads. But it would be, very easy, an event organizer basically is accusing everybody here because everybody creates like Dealmaker. I was out at FinCon. They have their own little app,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah.
we're all here and we're communicating. And so it's not, it's sort of like the hybrid of those. He sees it where, and I couldn't, he has some problems. I tried to create an account on it and I couldn't create an account on his thing. So, it's not perfect, right? But, there's that where the ability to scale and go really big, to be one of those companies, is really, like you say, is really hard. But a company like that in a region could do a million, $2 million and be one of these kinds of things where, one of the models of private equity funds is, oh, I want a company that does the people, the individuals say, I want to be a part of the community, but then it also at a higher level connects with this thing that, all the businesses there can scan it so they can do CRM marketing to them. And then I want the email marketing system that integrates with all of these things to be like that. Oh, and the social media community, so it's not just in this app, but it's like, you know what I mean? There's, oh, I want to be able to buy from other people in my community, whatever it is. You could be buying all of these little apps along this thing that make up for one ecosystem.
Right.
And
Right.
then, but none of those people that are developing those little apps really know how to get it to market and scale
Well,
properly,
yeah,
right?
okay,
And so
so
experience pulling the funds, and then other investors go, I don't have the time to babysit. That's the reason why active investors like to have a board seat, because they want to know what's going on and be able to influence and help and stuff like that. It helps them to be able to, so I think that is a model that says our model is we're going to get these guys to market really, really fast. We're going to solve this problem across a segment or a solution or a type of function, right? And we're going to have somebody that's developing an app here, that's in the universe, like all these things. We're going to have a business, we're going to have an app competition. Who's going to does the best one that does this? And whoever wins that gets our money in a revenue share model. That's your money, kind of like a fund of funds, right? In your model to do this across the board. And we're going to, and then we're going to find another one fits this. This is the puzzle that we're building, right? I could see that, but to me, I wouldn't invest in something on a revenue share model unless I knew there were grown-ups manning the shop.
right. It doesn't work for Georgia Tech juniors who've never worked, in any business ever, right? It works for people who are 15 years in a particular industry are going, okay, they're probably on the go-to-market side of the business. And then they have friends, they know how to call people, they know what a contract looks like, not
Oh,
afraid to ask
okay.
for money,
Yeah,
that type of
totally.
entrepreneur, right? And then so those are backable people, right? Or
Yes.
somebody who's not necessarily exited for $1 billion because there are not many of them, but there's plenty of people that are competent business executors, right? And then maybe you get them a little help along the way, with certain tactical things, but by and large, they just need an excuse to go sell something. Yeah, that's your B product with an A team, or maybe I don't know, a C product with a B team. But like we don't have to knock it out of the ballpark, Silicon Valley style. We can hit a lot of singles or doubles. If it's more deterministic that hey, there's a problem here. It's not a huge problem, but we're gonna help every lawyer of a certain type in the Southeast do yada yada. And then it's like it's too small for the VCs to come in,
Yeah.
crush you,
Oh, yeah,
and
I
then
see where you're going with that.
yeah,
Totally. Somebody that is in a segment like developing a tool that they know they'll use as a company, or they see this, it's a problem they're solving in their segment, in their industry, in their community, whatever. And then it's a rapid go to market. And, and this is the revenue we need to finish this, to pay for marketing, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
hire a sales guy,
Right.
whatever. And this is what we do. So the nice thing about a revenue model like that, like what you're talking about, that you could do is that you can expand beyond your traditional angels in that, because it is something that I coach the entrepreneurs on this all the time. And then what I'm building as this blueprint down here in Fayette County, of how you create a community-based capital model. And part of it is long-term strategic plays. So it's also the part of the angel profitability blueprint, long-term strategic plays. But it works. So within the angel profitability blueprint for new investors, it's the um, I don't know if this work, and I want them to do 10 investments, not stop at 3. Three, it's 3 and let's see. That's one
Uh,
of those things, okay? And so that they will continue on and build a diverse portfolio. And so is that you can this revenue share, because real estate investors understand the idea of rental income, and they want rental income. And if you can buy a property outright, great, you can do that. If you have to buy it with a bank, then you also have to assess, like, can I cover this mortgage when there's nobody to pay the rent, right?
right.
And
Cash flow.
that's what happens when people. That was the old model, which worked 2 decades ago, but not as much now, which we learned in the Great Recession, right? And so that's why, getting involved in investing in entrepreneurs, crowdfund investing, you would take that 50 grand you've been saving up and can't buy your first rental property, and put it into 20, 30 companies. Okay. In the crowdfunding model. If you're not accredited or you're
Uh,
getting started,
right.
because you're not stroking 25K checks. And even today in the angel investor credit, a lot of these angel investor groups only require a minimum of 2K in a deal and and 10K in a year to stay active. They want more, but they're trying to lower the threshold so more people will get started and become fans and love how they feel about angel investing, particularly when they make money, and they'll want to continue to do it and become a Sig Mosley that does it year after year after year and builds a hugely profitable portfolio. And so
Yeah. Hmm.
that is a very much a model that I'm a big fan of in sharing circular prosperity. As a business grows, pays a percentage of their revenue out in order to get to as their model, because they don't fit it, like a manufacturer that's been manufacturing offshore for years and years, because when they first got started, it was the easiest way to get started. You couldn't own a manufacturing plant. No investors are investing in a company in a manufacturing plant at an angel stage, because you invest in a software company that has no cost of goods and infrastructure cost, right? And so you can get a quarter of a container out of China. Well, that game has changed as a result of supply chain challenges starting back in COVID, all the way to what we got right now with tariffs. So the motivation to particularly if you're a company that is regularly getting shipments every month, and you got a big enough pipeline of products and revenue, like, build your own plant. Right? But the problem with that is that you can get bank dollars for all of that infrastructure. But when it comes to getting the marketing dollars to launch a new product, maybe you have a new product you want to launch as part of this. The carry cost of transitioning from the inventory you get offshore to getting the raw materials to be able to manufacture it locally, the training to train local people, right? All of that stuff is soft dollar costs that you might want to go get investors to invest and be your revenue share model, because guess what? You might get acquired by a private equity fund, but if you are a 5 or 7 or $10 million small manufacturing company in the state of Georgia, you're not getting angel money for that. You're not getting VC money for that. You're not getting PE money for that. The only place to really do that is by the people that know and love you, either customers or the people in your peer group, the chamber that you're a part of, whatever, and then just general marketing to people that say, I know that company, or that looks good. I'd love to be able to share in this revenue stream of this profitable company that is taking a step to go bigger, and be a part of that and tell that story and provide. They get the debt, say it's at 5 million, and they're going to raise 2 million in private capital. They know that 2 million is also kind of like the risk is mitigated because they know the big dollars there because of the infrastructure, the hard assets, right? That's a nice hybrid model for an expansion of a company that we can do here under the tools we have right now.
Very cool. And we're getting to the end of our hour here, but I did want to ask you about your book. Yeah, I'd be a poor host if I didn't mention your book. Uh, tell us the name of your book, and then when you write stuff and put yourself out there, you get a lot of interesting comments back. So, what's your book, and then kind of what have you learned after you wrote the book and put yourself out there?
So if I may, I have to, because learning the book and why I wrote the second book is really because the first book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, is a
Hmm.
very big book, right?
With tabs.
Well,
So you
that's
reference it.
all of the
Okay.
things that I would change. I want to update when I do my second edition. And so anyway, it was written to answer to the Jobs Act at the time because I believed that when crowdfunding was a thing, and so this is where when you're in the middle of a forest and you can't hear the trees I can't hear a tree fall in the whatever that saying is, that is because that was how I discovered that the people, my target market, this was targeted to accredited investors in corporate America that were not angel investing because of location and time and whatever. And I thought crowdfunding and the launch of this would wake people up and be like, oh my God, I can do this. How do I do this? And they would log a tool because there was no education, no books, very little still to this day, but there was none at the time, when I wrote this in 2017. And so it was a primer, how to. Each chapter's got a step by step, do this next, do this next. And I thought that people would be like, oh, here, great. And they're going to take notes and they're going to do this, right? Well, no, in reality, and he's even got footnotes and stuff like that. And it's like a glossary. And so, but the reality is that people, when they do a book, they like it. If it's dense, they go like, oh man, that's hard. I'll come back to it. And it sits on the shelf, right? That's
Hmm.
why I had to come up with the digital academy to make it where people can be led through the learning process. But I also learned that people didn't know that it's hard. So I needed to make something that was really easily digestible for that person, whether they're could be an accredited investor or not. And that they were like looking for an alternative to the existing types of assets, stocks, real estate, crypto, right? That they wanted to invest with impact. The movement of people towards investing is much more towards, I want my money to have impact. And the reality with the stock market is that everything else is transactional. In stock market, you're transacting with another stockholder, the company, other than and it's always by, somebody's selling, somebody's buying, is go low high, right? It's like, if stocks go up because more people are trying to sell it than are wanting to buy it. Okay. That's, basic stuff. And so, that the company benefits when their stock is higher than it is when it's lower because it affects their ability to borrow money. It affects a lot of things within the company itself. And so, so, and we've learned over time, in part, whether it's a worldwide situation or some kind of viral thing that happens, or the company can have great metrics, but all of a sudden it's like it's drops for no apparent reason, and it takes a long time for a stock to work itself back up because there's this compounding effect. Oh, it's dropping. I better sell my stock, which makes it go lower, right? And
Mhm.
so, and we talked about real estate already. So looking for an alternative to have an impact. And so my premise is that investing in entrepreneurs is the most direct way to have an impact. You want to solve a problem, you want to solve a cure to cancer, you want to solve climate, you want to whatever it is, right? There's companies out there solving it, even if it's a personal problem. I wish there was some place that I could get affordable mental health services, or I could do whatever. You know what I mean? Anything that you wish there was something, there's probably an entrepreneur out there trying to solve that problem. Okay. So this book, lot thinner, no
Okay.
footnotes,
Yeah.
nothing. It doesn't have any graphics because it's short. This other one has pictures. I even have a cartoon in there about the courtship of how angels fall in love with entrepreneurs, the courtship process, right? I mean, like all this, I have it was, yeah, quotes from famous people. The thing that's common between them all is this inside secret contract. So this is Inside Secrets to Crowdfund Investing. Follow Jane's journey. See how a new generation builds wealth with purpose, passion, and profit. Right. This one was a step-by-step guide to leverage private equity for, passive wealth creation. Big fancy words, right? So this is really relatable, intended for whether you're a millennial, you're a non-accredited, somebody that's making less than $200,000 a year, but you've got some extra money, somebody that's like frustrated with your job, and you're like, I think I got to start a business. Everybody says I can only get financially independent if I'm an entrepreneur, and you got no idea what to start a business. And what my thing is, don't quit your day job. Keep the benefits. Benefits are a big thing these days. And so keep your
Mhm.
benefits in your day job and take your excess cash like Jane does and put it into companies that are doing something that you are excited about. And this follows her journey. It is like the bold is what she does. The rest of it is my tip. I got it back from my ghost writer that was helping me write it. It's where they interview you and write a chapter, right? And it was like 150 pages, 130 pages, I don't know. I added almost 100 pages, 670 to 100 pages to it, getting it with Jane's story because people had read it and said, "I want more Jane." So I took things where I was like, "Oh, go do XYZ," and I turned it into, and then because Jane figured this out, she did XYZ, right? That kind of a thing.
Mm.
And so
Nice.
it's really a relatable story designed to make it believable that anybody willing to spend time learning how to do this, right, can build a profitable portfolio of investing in entrepreneurs with revenue. And the secret is diversification, which is sometimes angels don't always do this, and that's the diversification of stage, industry, and type of offering. So you
Oh.
cover the bases from revenue share to pure startups doing something with the biggest potential to later stage companies getting ready to go public that are doing a Reg A plus. Right, where you can look at their SEC audited financials. You know that they're raising this money. You can look at their business. You can see that they're either going to get bought in the next 18 to 24 months, or they're going to go public on a small cap NASDAQ. It doesn't, you're not going to get 10x, but you might get 50% return on your money, right? You're going to get some
Nice.
return on your money because
Yeah.
there's a pathway to the exit. Okay.
Nice.
Right.
Okay.
That's really the premise behind it. And that's what Jane does. Publishing different. What I've learned publishing this almost a decade ago, very different than published today. Um, and AI, a lot of companies that are out there in the publishing world that do this need to get up to speed in the 21st century of like some of their stuff. And so this one, it's out on Amazon. You get every version of it from Kindle, hardback, paperback, Audible on Amazon. It's available in paperback at bookstores because I'm working on getting all the other stuff done. You have to go through a completely different channel than Amazon to publish if you want to get in libraries or bookstores. So that's part of the
Nice.
learning curve this time that's been different.
Yeah. Well, Karen, it's been great having you here.
Wait,
It's
no.
all
I
it's
I
all
gotta
about
give my
travel.
travel story.
Yeah, it's all about traveling and seeing people out there in the world, making it happen. You got any great travel stories you want to
I'm gonna get
share
I
with
have
us?
a travel story. I got you this
Okay.
is the travel guys, right? You
Yeah,
know,
please do.
Sky Lounge. I
Yes.
loved being a member of the Delta Sky Lounge back in the day when I was traveling on with IBM. I'd get on a plane on Monday, sometimes Sunday nights, and come back on Friday, right?
Do you remember the old Atlanta airport on Virginia Avenue?
Oh,
The
the
old
old
one.
no,
The
no.
old terminal used to have to get on. It's the same runway. It's just on the other side. And now I think like the FBI and stuff uses it.
Oh, yeah,
And
no, yeah. So
okay,
no, it was Hartsfield when I came
okay,
in,
still
right?
Hartsfield. It's just a different like
Oh,
terminal
yeah.
building,
Yeah, there was
different
like a
building.
secret
Yeah,
passage there. I don't yeah, maybe. I might have even done that because back then I was coming from Gwinnett. Now I'm coming from south of the airport.
got it.
So my travel story is when I was new at IBM, I was still kind of in training, I think. I was going to be part of the 9X business centers, but I was still kind of training. We had been up in New York for a lot for this training stuff that we were doing, and this was one of those epic snowstorms. Okay, epic snowstorm where we and a lot of planes were getting canceled. We were having to be on a really big plane, one of those I don't know, the ones with the 3 seats on the side and like 4 or 5 in the middle, Boeing something. I don't know. You probably know. And it was and it was one of those epic snowstorms. Now keep in mind, I'm a Florida gal. So snow was fairly novel to me in general, right? Florida, you like if you could scrape enough off of your window to build like one little snowball, that was considered big. You know, the icicles I had seen were like this big back when I grew up, right? And so, anyway, we were the only flight going from New York, LaGuardia to Hartsfield, Atlanta that day. It was a packed flight. We're on the runway with them de-icing the plane. We had a window to take off that was really low, and we were, like, sitting on the runway, like, for a while, waiting for them to, like, to take off, and then we get up,
Oof.
right? And they're, de-icing the plane and, like, all this stuff. We get up and up, but because of all the snow in Atlanta, they only had 1 runway cleared. So we end up cycling for, like a while, like
Okay.
hours up in the
Oh my
air.
God.
They
Okay.
opened up the bar. They said, "Okay, we had the biggest," and these were all I had like there was probably 30 of us young IBMers that were like this new class of people going through this training, the first hires. We were all these young people just come out of New York. We had been, and now we're on this big old plane circling. We were late leaving, late landing, having a good old time, having a party on a plane, circling Hartsfield till we could land. So that was that's my sky, that my travel, one of my, crazy ass travel stories.
You have to wait for Joe Bob
we
on the John
landed,
Deere
we landed
tractor.
safely. And a lot of
Yeah.
people, everybody that was connecting to something else had missed their flights, could hardly get rental cars. People were trying to rent rental cars to get back to Alabama. It was snow, all this kind of stuff, all that, kind of a thing. But anyway, so that was the story.
Well, how can people get in touch with you after this on the internet if they want to follow up with you about your book or some of these other activities and
Yeah.
or your academy?
Well, if you like searching, my name, Kieran Rands, is I'm the one. There's a professor in Australia that comes up sometimes, but and then Compassionate Capitalist. I did looked it up just the other day, and I'm the full first page, right?
All
Um,
right.
and even occasional article or something like out there. But there's the Bitly link I think will be in the thing. It's link little link capital CCS for Compassionate Capitalist show, and it is has everything, my social media, the book links, the podcast links, the like whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, as well as freebies. You can get a free like the 4 Ws of crowdfunding, like all the history, what it looks like from an entrepreneur and investor perspective in crowdfunding, the fundamentals of it, as well as everything. It's everything. And so that's the easiest way to get all of my stuff.
Okay, and we'll link in the description below. Well, Karen, it's been great having you. Bye for now.
Yes. Thank you.
Go Gators.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us in the Sky Lounge. Please like and subscribe to hear more from Tales from the Sky Lounge here and anywhere else you get your podcasts.